I'd also like to welcome the CEO of the Financial Institute of Training Center in Nigeria, Mrs. Chizo Maliz, who is particularly passionate about social issues. So I'm delighted that despite you being traveling, being between cities, that you're able to join. And I can see many others. I recognize many others. It's now on the hour. So let me just welcome each of you to this first edition of my Twitter space on climate change, and specifically as we prepare for COP27. I have to say that I am impressed with the resounding response to my invitation. It means there's a recognition of the importance of understanding climate change and indeed seeking ways in which we can avert what will be a climate crisis. It is also for me a testament to the commitment of each one of us to play our part in forestalling the far-reaching consequences of climate change, which for me is an existential crisis if we don't take urgent action. I am personally passionate about improving the understanding of these issues, and I believe that engagement is extremely important because we can learn from each other and learn how we can play our part better. There are lots of issues to cover. Many of you I see are familiar, very, very familiar with the issues around climate change. But permit me, particularly for this session, to also have us spend some time on some basic concepts, what I call the ABC of climate change. I'd also like us today to spend some time on what the implications are of climate change for Africa as a continent. What are some of the issues that Africa needs to think about? And I see many of you are from various parts of the continent, so you probably have a sense of what needs to be done. I think the science behind climate change is extremely important. The threats, the opportunities for us as individuals, for businesses, for governments, and for society as a whole. Hopefully, in the time that we have, we'll be able to do good work on the ABC of climate change, but also on the issues for Africa. I see there's still people joining, but I'm very particular about starting things on time. So let me stall a bit and introduce myself. Benjamin, my co-host, has already said a few words about me, but I will say a few things about myself, and then I'll hand over to him to reiterate some of the ground rules that he talked about, because it's important that we have a fruitful session. For those who don't know me, I'm currently a scholar at University of Oxford, and my work covers capital markets, finance, economic development, and sustainability. I'm a member of the recently launched, in fact, it was launched, I believe, 10 days ago, the Africa Advisory Board of the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero, GFANZ. I'm a member of a number of other boards, including being a chair of a UK-based asset manager. As Benjamin mentioned, I was the CEO of the Nigerian Capital Markets Regulator, Securities and Exchange Commission Nigeria, but also served on the global body that comprises all of the regulators that regulate 95% of the capital markets in the world. I've also spent the bulk of my career in development banking, and most recently was the treasurer of the World Bank. The reason I highlight some of these aspects of my background is really just to showcase the kinds of organizations that I've been associated with. And only because they've been leaders in promoting the issues around climate change and the issues around social change. I'm most proud of what the development banks have done in leading on sustainability. They developed the green bond market, which in 2020 saw an issuance of $450 billion. They've been able to innovate in terms of other social bonds, sustainability bonds. You've got gender bonds, you've got blue bonds, you've got other thematic bonds. They provide disaster risk management instruments that help countries around the world protect themselves against natural disasters, including earthquake, flooding, and the others. I hope that one of the sessions that we will have will be focused on innovative finance, because at the end of the day, financial resources are critical to the issues around solving climate change. I'm hoping that this session will last a maximum of 2 hours and not more. Benjamin hosted and Dr. Jeff have hosted sessions that have lasted much longer. But I think that we will try and just keep this to 2 hours, despite how passionate we all are. In addition to what I think we should cover today, which is the ABCs of climate change and also issues for Africa, I hope to host other sessions in the future leading up to COP27. Climate and security issues are key. Climate and food security, climate and gender, climate finance, as I mentioned, climate and agriculture, and the impact on several sectors. And some of what the energy companies, cement companies, steel companies need to do to try and really transition to a decarbonized world. We will cover best practice around the world. We will do case studies where possible. I expect from time to time to invite experts on various aspects to join the discussion. I'd like the discussion to be interactive, and I will create opportunities during the conversation to invite people to share thoughts where possible. So let me pause there and ask Benjamin if you can introduce yourself. Thank you so much for being my co-host. Without you, I don't think I'd be able to manage all of the technicalities, even though I think gratitude to Twitter for creating this simple tool for us to engage. You will assist me with admitting people to speak, but maybe you can introduce yourself and share the ground rules again for today's session that you had shared with us earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Excuse me. My name is Benjamin Mayo Emedan. I'm a Nigerian and currently live in Europe. Privileged to be co-hosting with Dr. Arunma Oteh and with other persons that will be present here today who are part of the listening session. I want to use the opportunity to say, please, we have a ground rules that makes sometimes Twitter spacing go smooth. First, we are going to be screening every question that will be coming to directed to Doctor. Please, I want you to post that question to my DM. My DM is open, or you post it on the comment section. And secondly, once you request the mic. And once you have you made a speaker, please mute your mic so that you don't disturb other person who is speaking or interfere, so that we don't be having that frequency interference. And secondly, please be straight and go straight to the point when asking your questions. I think we're going to be giving like 2 minutes so that we'll have enough speaker, so that Doctor can also have time to give a light, throw more light to these questions. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Benjamin. So I think we should really just start from the ABC of the ABC, which is, for me, what is climate change? It is, in my view, the greatest challenge that the world faces today. And that's because it impacts everything. It impacts security, it impacts food, It impacts issues around livelihood, health issues. It, of course, refers to the changes to biophysical environments, to ecosystems, to biodiversity and natural resources caused directly or indirectly by human beings. Specifically, human activity is causing, as you would have seen, severe effects, including global warming, environmental degradation, mass extinction, biodiversity loss, ecological crisis, and collapse. I will share a few examples, and I will invite you to share some examples that I'm sure that you've experienced. One that has broken my heart is really what happened to Pakistan recently. 1/3 of the country is underwater. The Economist of the 3rd of September noted that for 2 months, vast swathes of Pakistan have been inundated by its heaviest rainfall on record. Many people have passed because of this, and early estimates put the cost of this disaster at $10 billion. On August 30th, the climate minister said that 1/3 of the country was underwater and that the government had declared 72 out of 160 districts to be disaster zones. Europe is facing damaging floods this month from Bulgaria to Italy to Portugal and to Spain. An emergency was declared in Sochi, Russia, as you know, in July after severe floods. In June, there were mudslides in Austria. Early in the year, hundreds of homes were damaged after Storm Franklin caused rivers to rise. Over the last few days, many of you may have followed, particularly those who live in North America, Hurricane and Southern America, Hurricane Fiona, creating havoc in the Dominican Republic and in Puerto Rico. This weekend, 130,000 people in Japan continue to lack power following the typhoon Nanmadol, which hit the country over the weekend, also damaging a space center. During the summer, the heat waves in Europe and particularly in the UK had not been seen in a very long time. Last year, Madagascar faced a famine that was solely due to climate change issues. Many of you would be familiar with Hurricane Ida, which was devastating for Mozambique and many other countries in the Southern African region. We've seen floods, heat waves, droughts, security challenges resulting from climate change in every region of the world. We've seen heat waves in California, we've seen floods in Europe, we've seen droughts, famines, and of course, I do believe that some of the reasons we have the security challenges in the Sahel and in the Horn of Africa are really because of climate issues. We've seen a lot of what's going on in Asia and the Pacific, floods, heat waves, rising sea levels. So let me pause and invite as many of us as want to in the time that we have to share their experiences with extreme weather conditions. But maybe I'll start with you, Benjamin.
Thank you, Doctor. I live here in Germany and in Bayern. I can remember vividly that was 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago now, in a state under the, it's called under Westphal, and they had a very catastrophic event that took almost, I think, 300 something person's life. Properties and homes were destroyed, worth than billions of euros and all that. So a lot of people were moved out of that city to other cities to take refuge just because of the issues of climate change. If you look at the Jumbotron, I just posted the climate climate change disaster in Pakistan, like the doctors spoke about, you can just go in there and take a look at those pictures. And these are evidence of and the effect of climate change that is currently ravaging the entire world today. Please, I know there is a lot of people on the listening session. Like I said, who is also co-hosting, I will not be taking much time. Whenever I'm given the opportunity to say something, please request the mic. I want you to request the mic so that we'll be given the mic. Then you tell us the situation in your area and the extreme situation that you have witnessed concerning the climate change in your location or anywhere that you've been. Thank you as you request the mic. As many as you can so that I'll be
Okay.
able to look into them.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if I'm the one who's supposed to accept.
Yeah, I see a lot, but it's only one that appears on my profile.
Oh, okay. I've accepted one, so I think the person can go ahead, I assume. Or how does it work?
Yeah, the person is going to come up and then I will be able to see the person. I haven't seen any speaker yet. Sunday is requesting. Sunday, I can see you. Mr. Sunday, just give me a moment. I'm going to accept your request.
Sorry about my poor skills in this.
Not poor at all. Try your best, I think.
I see there are several requests, but I don't know what to do.
Just go into the week. Just get out. Now I have Mr. Sunday. Now I have Mr. Sunday. Oh, Falai.
Okay.
Mr. Sunday. Sunday, please hold on. Mr. Sunday is the CEO at Sinenco Green Power and formerly Econenco or the Syria entrepreneur is energy. I believe he's also into energy stuff.
But
Mr.
maybe whoever it is can introduce themselves, and
okay.
So you don't have to do that. Yeah, please go ahead.
Mr. Sunday, please go on.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity. So, as Patrick mentioned, Sandoshi Ifalai, and I run Seneco Green Power Limited. We're very active in clean energy, especially to adapt the smallholder farmers to climate change. I'm very thrilled to see this kind of space discussing the issue of climate change, especially in Nigeria. In 2020, I was part of a project that looks at the impact on the smallholder farmers in Nigeria. And it's so alarming, and it's not news. I can see clearly that there is no full-time farmers in Nigeria that have not suffered loss of crops because of climate change. The August break we used to know is extended to like 2, 3, 4 weeks now. They are losing crops. And currently we are working, adapting them through solar powered irrigation, So the issues of climate adaptation is urgent, and this kind of discussion should come more frequently. And I really appreciate this, especially from the doctor, for initiating this. And I think from here, we can go further to discussing the actions. What could be done, not just highlighting the problems, but what could be done. And also, I appreciate the fact that about the climate financing and so that she's specialized in. So we can just go into that aspect as well, how we can support the people on the field, which is the social impact entrepreneurs, to do more for these people that have been affected on the field. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think those are really useful comments from an expert. Maybe we can have the next speaker because I've added several speakers just so people can just take sorry that I'm a novice with managing the space.
No, so It's okay. It's okay. It's okay, doctor. Please, can I have a green Chidi? Green Chidi, are you there?
Yes. Yes, I'm here.
Please.
Thank you, Dr. Oteh and Benjamin. My name is Chidi Oteh. I'm a policymaker, actually in the UK, not in Nigeria. But as you can probably tell from my name, I'm Nigerian by birth. I've worked in the sphere of green finance and green policymaking here in the UK for over a decade. So it is really heartening to see people of Dr. Oteh's stature lifting topics we've been arguing about here in relative isolation for a long time. Seeing Dr. Oteh lift these things up is really impressive and heartening. She and I met over a decade ago when she was at the African Development Bank. I'm sure she's completely forgotten me, but she's the reason why I came in today. But just to quickly answer your question and make sure I keep to my 2-minute limit, the nature of the IPCC's AR6 WG3 report, which is the latest big report talking about climate change impacts, the nature of that report is very wide-ranging and talks not just about an expectation of specified impacts, but broader uncertainty about how these impacts will hit, where they will hit, the severity of their hit, and even the timing. I think people assume these things are very fixed. They're not. We're entering into a zone of uncertainty that's very dangerous for everyone. Here in the UK, 2 months ago, temperatures hit 41 degrees, almost 41 degrees centigrade as ambient temperature. At King's Cross Station in London, the surface temperature hit 61 degrees centigrade. Now, I know that if you live in northern Nigeria at the height of dry season, having cement that is so hot that you can't walk on it is not a big deal. But in Britain, it shocked a lot of people to see that climate change could impact anywhere in the world, including a place allegedly as safe and stable as London. But having said that, which is the important thing to say, that it affects absolutely everyone, I'm really keen here to find out more about the ideas that Dr. Oteh has for how green finance evolves in future. I currently work as a senior research fellow at the Drawdown Project in San Francisco, and we're trying to figure out optimal ways of trying to align capital for African development needs. And this is profoundly important. It's profoundly important because we don't want to live in a world where people spend all of their time talking about temperature alone or people's carbon footprint alone. It is important to work on the co-benefits that green finance can create. And I'll just end by stating that we've seen some amazing work already done. We want to see more of the same. So only last week, the Tony Elumelu Foundation announced a groundbreaking employment-led climate finance initiative with the UNDP. Now, those kinds of initiatives, in my opinion, are extremely important because the beauty and the energy of Africa is so great that it is very clear in my mind that that is where all the climate solutions for the rest of the planet will come from. I sit here and I have to argue virtually as an Englishman that in my blood, in my heritage, in my family, in my people, we have always known that nature was important. 100 years ago when we were worshipping trees, they told us we were stupid. It's taken 100 years to prove us right, but we had always been correct. This is Africa's time, and it's great to see women like Dr. Oteh leading the march forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green-Chidi. Doctor,
Thank
you
you
want to
so
respond?
much, Benjamin. Please allow me to react and then maybe suggest that we have 2 more speakers, and then we continue, and then we and then we have a few more speakers come on, because for each of our 2 speakers, I hope, like me, that each person has learned quite a bit, and I hope that Chidi will post the IPCC's latest report. And I like his comment around, that we're in the zone of uncertainty. And I'm going to give him a phrase, which is climate change does not discriminate. Given the story he told about what happened at King's Cross in terms of the temperature. He is also interested in us talking about some of the innovative financing options. My intention would be to have a dedicated session on financing. And what I'd like to do is, it's an area where I've worked very a lot on, but I'd also like to invite some experts. I'm hoping that my colleague at the World Bank, who was behind the first plain vanilla green bond that was ever issued in 2008, which then birthed the green bond market. I hope that I can invite her, given her experience. There's another former colleague who has been behind all of the disaster risk instruments which the World Bank offers countries. Mexico has been a big beneficiary of that. I'm hoping that he can join that session. So permit me to plan that session properly, because we're also thinking about what are some of the innovative and creative ways that we can do finance. I'm really pleased to hear about the Tony Elumelu initiative, and I like your point around that Africans already recognized the value of nature. It's the first time someone's articulating that, so we must be confident and proud going forward as to what we can do in this space. So we'll have Benjamin, please permit us to have two more speakers, and then we'll continue with our ABCs. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Please, can I have a great God?
Okay, thanks, Benjamin. Thanks, Doctor. This is a very interesting section we're having, and I can see the enthusiasm is actually high. I just want to say quickly, there's been a lot of hypocrisy, if I might use that word, in terms of climate change. I say this because we remember during the COVID period when it was really hot, the amount of money that was spent on research to develop the vaccine was really high. And it didn't take maybe just like a year or so, and a vaccine was being developed that could solve or help mitigate the impact of COVID-19. But over the years, we've been talking about climate change, and people are actually just paying lip service to it. There hasn't been really a drastic effort or a concerted effort to make sure that this thing is really addressed. I believe if we are able, or the world, United Nations, UNESCO, all these organizations are able to come together and say, hey guys, let's bring the scientists together. What are the issues here? We're talking about carbon capture, less use of fossil fuel, or transitioning from greener energies and all that. If the scientists are able to come together with enough funding and research assistance, I believe you will be able to develop innovative solutions that will curtail the impact of climate change. But the issue has been, especially the most developed advanced countries are paying lip service to this, because for them, it's all about business. The climate change issue, for instance, has always been looked upon in terms of fossil fuel, but it's not the only issue. In sub-Saharan Africa, where we have most people using refrigerators or ACs, AC contributes the amount of HCF that comes from air conditioning systems is 10 times or sometimes even 10,000 times greater than the impact you get from fossil fuel. But you see, over the years, people have always been talking about fossil fuel and all that. So that's why I see the hypocrisy in terms of dealing with climate change is really amazing. We really need to be open about it and take it head on. Now, nobody's talking about the use of air conditioners, for instance, in Africa. While the air conditioning system, the HCFs, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, they contribute more than 10 times the impact of CO2, carbon dioxide, which is the problem of the ozone layer as we know it. The ozone layer, or the ozonosphere, as we know, is being depleted because of this HCF, mostly. But you see that the impact of fossil fuel and all that is where the focus is on. So I really feel if we are serious about climate change, most especially the advanced countries, all the agencies or organizations that are involved will come together and bring the scientists. It's all about carbon capturing. I don't really see the difficult, I bet you, I don't really see the challenge in terms of, now some companies, for instance, have been able to develop massive underground tankers that capture this carbon, recycle it, and bring it into use into another form of energy. So these things, if emphasis is really paid to these areas, the issue of carbon capturing, the issue of less use of HCFs, even though there has been a change in terms of using HCF to another form, the same form of fluorocarbons that are being used is also impacting greatly on the climate. So if the world is serious, if we really want to do something about it, I bet you something could be done. It's just for the people to come together and say, hey, what do we need to do here? And the solution is maybe not too far from us, but there hasn't been a concerted effort in terms of developing the technology that will be able to reduce this carbon capture and also broaden the spectrum, not just focusing on one particular area in terms of fossil fuel and all that. The use systems that contribute to HCF should be drastically dealt with. I'm surprised. If you go to most
sorry, can you run up in 30 seconds, please?
Yes, I'm running up in 30 seconds, thank you. So you see that the use of HCF, for instance, I mean, most of us are not even aware of HCFs. The air conditioning system, the refrigerators that we use contribute 10 times more than the amount that comes from the fossil fuel, for instance. But people are not even talking about it. So I think if we have a concerted effort towards this, the issue, and by the way, the climate itself changes every 50 to 30 years. So sometimes we mix it up. And I believe that the way things are going, with the level of information and knowledge that people are having about it, especially with the impact of Pakistan, for instance, which is a mess, if people come together, we'll be able to overcome this challenge. Thank you very much.
I really like the points that you made, and I think your Twitter handle, Great God, is a good one. So hypocrisy, we need to guard against hypocrisy, but there needs to be a lot more emphasis on science and research. I would argue that it's actually the science and research that got us this far. I'm always fascinated when I read the IPCC reports every year that are issued every year, and the brain power of scientists. What I want to see more is some of those scientists come from developing countries and Africa particularly, because your point around the impact of air conditioning, and I was just, as you were speaking, I was trying to remember what the statistics is. I think the US use of air conditioning and refrigeration is actually has much more of contributes more to greenhouse gas emissions than all of sub-Saharan Africa contributes, if I remember rightly, from my own from some of what I've read in the past. So your point around where is that focus on the impact of air conditioning and refrigeration? Your point around some of the innovative solutions, carbon capture, and there's a lot of work that's going on. Because sequestration of carbon is going to be game changing. Being able to store battery storage is also very important, because that will help us do more with solar and other forms of energy that today we can't store easily. So one more speaker, and then I'm actually enjoying this. I think I should listen rather than speak. One more speaker, and then I will then maybe go through some of the other basic tasks, because it seems like everybody in this space is actually very familiar with the issues. But it's always nice to go back to basics. So please, the next speaker, Benjamin.
Thank you, Doctor. Can I have Njenje Patriot?
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
All right. Let me say a very big thank you to you, Dr. Oteh, for leading this conversation. Thank you so much, also, Benjamin, for co-hosting. I want to make it short, but I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I do worry that smaller countries are being coerced or cajoled to adopt net zero policies without addressing the basic things that are sorely lacking in their countries. Because I think that whatever smaller countries are able to do in terms of intervention will have so little an impact as to be insignificant because there's so little industrialization. But I can, of course, I stand to be corrected. But having said that, I'm also aware that a government with the will can push for things as simple as planting trees and trying to push back the Sahara, in the case of Nigeria, for example. But coming home to Nigeria, where I come from, I'd like to know what we know about. I just want to be educated about things we have in place as responses to actual disasters due to climate change, in terms of early warning and managing ongoing ones, and basically saving lives, right? Case in point is one happening now currently in Jigawa. Does anybody know how we can help? That's me.
Thank you. I mean, you're much more knowledgeable than you admit, and I think one of the terms we're going to discuss is, or that I will present, is the nationally determined contribution. So I hope that allows countries themselves to drive their trajectory to a net zero transition. And if you will recall, both India and Nigeria have basically said that they will expect to achieve net zero in 2060, while some of the Western countries have said that they would achieve in 2050. So there is flexibility for countries to drive their own agenda because they're supposed to present their nationally determined contribution. But maybe it's a good place for me to then go back to some of the basics, even if many of us on the call already know this. So my second one is, and I just want to thank all of you who have spoken and who have really reinforced the importance of urgent, concerted, coordinated action, but also innovation in terms of the science, innovation in terms of finance. So my next one would be just the Sustainable Development Goal 13. As you all know, Sustainable Development Goal 13 is one of the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I think some people have already tweeted that the SDG Goal 13 is really calling society to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. But I will pause and ask if anyone can share with us what the other Sustainable Development Goals are, and maybe the background to the Sustainable Development Goals. Can any of the speakers take that? Anybody who's been admitted?
Please, if you know you want to take that, what the doctor just said, please just raise up your hand so that we'll be able to bring you forward, so that it won't be rowdy, so it won't be a rowdy session. Thank you for your understanding.
I think others are like me; they're not as familiar with their hand. Oh, somebody knows. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, so
Joseph, please go on.
Yeah, so I'm Joseph Onoja, and I'm the Director General of the Nigerian Conservation Foundation. Yeah, so to talk about the other SDGs, I would like to talk about SDGs from the angle that the Resilience Center in Stockholm talked about it, so that we'll put it in proper context, because before now, the message has been, oh, it must be a prosperity, and then people, then the planet. But actually, it is the other way around. It's supposed to be the planet first, and then you have prosperity, and then you have people, or you have people before you have prosperity. So the SDGs they're going to be goal 6, goal 13, Goal 14, and Goal 15. So that by the time you have all of these that have to do with the environment and climate change is involved, before you can build the sustainable part of the human life, when you talked about no poverty, zero hunger, quality education, and so on, before you come to the part of Goal 9, Goal 10, and Goal 11, where you talked about decent work and economic growth, industry innovation and infrastructure, reducing inequality, and living in sustainable cities and communities. So we have to look at it from that pyramid so that we'll be able to understand where this sits, and then we'll be able to have that context as we discuss climate change on one hand, we discuss life underwater on the other hand, and we discuss life on land. Because by the time we have a conducive environment, then we'll be able to have the SDGs, which is the mark of human and development as we live sustainable lives here on earth and prosperous lives here on earth. So that is just a kind of a summary of the SDGs. And goal 17, which is very important, is the fact that we cannot do it alone. We cannot go it alone. We have to build partnerships, partnerships that would last, partnerships between government, between private sector, and between civil societies. Without partnerships, we will not be able to do it alone. It's too big for one person. The space is very wide. So there's a need for us to come together so that we will be able to see what we can do to to build that synergy to be able to fight this battle, because it's a battle for survival, survival of humanity. So as the previous speaker said, it doesn't. I mean, it's not partial. It's going to cut across everybody. So as NCF, one of the areas that we want to see happen, talking about the previous topic that we're talking about in terms of how we see it in Nigeria, in the space we work, we want to be very practical about how this affects, especially the local communities, the farmers. You go to them, they are not able to access their farms again because they are being taken over either by sand dunes or by degradation. And also, when you go to the southern part of the country, there's flooding everywhere, taking over farmlands, destroying homes. So these are all issues that we must look at it practically as we look at the SDGs, and especially SDG 13, and then how we'll be able to build that as we talk about. Hopefully, Dr. Oteh talked about the financial part of it. We need to bring all of these together as we see how these SDGs fit into themselves as a building block so that we'll be able to take it up from there. So I hope I'll be able to make justice to that. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. I think you were phenomenal. One of the things that I admired was the way that you linked the various SDGs. I have a slightly different view from the center in Stockholm because I've never really decided which SDG is more more important. And I think that the bringing making sure that planet, people, all goes together. For me, is really the way to go. But my favorite goal is actually, guess what? Goal 17. And I like the way you presented it, that we cannot go it alone. We need to build partnerships. And my view is that where one country goes is where everybody goes. Where one region within a country goes is where the other goes. And I'm glad that there are people like you, leaders like you, in Nigeria running the Nigerian Conservation Foundation that are taking a lead on this issue, because I like your point around how can we have practical solutions that focus on the local communities, and also some of the challenges we're having with floods, and even what we saw in Jigawa, which was mentioned by Mr. Chidi Obiora earlier, or someone else. Sorry, the person who spoke after him, is also a reflection of some of the challenges that Nigeria is facing in respect of climate issues. Does anybody else want to say anything about the SDGs while you're thinking about what to say? I just, I always want to position any of the discussions that I lead around any of the goals, around all of the goals, because I think it's important that we look at the Sustainable Development Goal issues collectively. In fact, I would suggest that, and somebody was beginning to allude to that, that the way that we must look at the climate goal is to make sure that we have the right balance between development and achieving our climate goals. I always use the example that it's very difficult to have, to say to a mother that whose only source is on clean cooking energy. So if they use firewood to cook, that their options are to use clean energy, which they don't have access to, or not to feed their children. The choice they will make is to feed their children. And that's why we must make sure that we have the right kind of balance as we think about how we deal with these climate issues, especially for the continent of Africa. But in terms of just the historical perspective, as all of you know, I think it was in the year 2000 when the Millennium Development Goals were designed, and there were 8 of them, very much focused on specific issues and focused really on developing countries. And in 2012, there was, I think, a Rio conference where there was a discussion around what should be the next step. 1 or 2 goals were met. The one about extreme poverty, halving extreme poverty, but maybe we can do better as a society, and maybe we can get all of the nations of the world to come together. So there was a process that started in Rio in Brazil in 2012. That process then led to decisions around practical and clear measures for implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. And that process was what birthed the Sustainable Development Goals, which were then approved in September of 2015. And I would suggest that they've been a good guide, both for countries. I work with another colleague on the Oxford Global Research Initiative, Ms. Ruth Ako, who works at the IMF. And some of the work we've seen is that the SDGs, that monitoring of SDGs, the targets allow countries, allow regions to see how they're doing. Of course, we know that we're not going to make it for 2030, given some of the challenges we've had with COVID, but also given the pace of individual countries. But I think looking at the goals holistically, for me, is extremely important. So not looking at SDG 13, the climate goal, in isolation. And therefore, I'll encourage everybody to renew, their commitment to what they will contribute to each of the SDGs. And just like gender, poverty, zero hunger, I do think that climate is all encompassing and can impact, life on land, life in the seas, economic prosperity, economic growth, infrastructure, and some of the other areas that are covered by the Sustainable Development Goals. My next ABC is the Paris Agreement. So, of course, in September 2015, the heads of government, more than 190, I don't know if it's 196 governments, basically agreed the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 agenda, which is that in 15 years from 2015, which is literally 8 years from now, that we will have made progress, significant progress on the goals. In December of that year, there was a specific discussion around climate because of its importance, and the Paris Agreement was birthed as a legally binding international treaty on climate change. It was adopted by 196 countries in Paris at what is the Conference of Parties, the 21st one, on the 12th of December 2015. And of course, it entered into force in November of the following year. Its goal is to limit global warming to preferably 1.5 degrees centigrade compared to pre-industrial levels, so compared to the 1800s. To achieve this long-term temperature goal, countries aim to reach global peaking of greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible, so that we can achieve a climate neutral world by mid-century. The Paris Agreement, in my view, is a landmark in multilateral climate change process. And of course, discussions had been going on for many years. In fact, one of the things that I'm sure when we discuss the finance segment that will come up is that in the Copenhagen discussions in 2009, there was a commitment made by developed nations as to what they will do to help the developing nations, which unfortunately is yet to be fulfilled. But the Paris Agreement was the first time a binding agreement which brought together all nations into a common cause to undertake ambitious efforts to combat climate change and adapt its effects was reached. The implementation of this agreement requires, in my humble view, economic and social transformation based on the best available science. The agreement works in 5-year cycles of increasingly ambitious climate action carried out by countries. And that's why the nationally determined, the contributions is a very important exercise. As I was alluding to earlier, and I'm going to ABC4 in terms of managing our time better, that countries have committed to communicate actions that they will be taking to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in order to reach their goals of the Paris Agreement. Countries also communicate in the NDCs actions they will take to build resilience, to adapt to the impact of rising temperatures. They frame their long-term strategies. While they're thinking of their short-term strategies, they're thinking of their long-term strategies. I know that a number of you are from Nigeria. I'm very impressed with actually the leadership that our Vice President, Professor Osinbajo, has been taking on this initiative, and some of the work that has been done in making sure that Nigeria has been doing okay in submitting its nationally determined contributions, but also in crafting what is that path in terms of energy transition. And I think that the Vice President was one of those who spoke up very early around the importance of gas as a transition fuel. And I think today there's a greater recognition that gas is important, that we're not going to treat gas like other fossil fuels. Does anybody want to say something, or should I maybe share a few? Maybe I should say something about greenhouse gas emissions, because we all say it like it's a word that everybody is familiar with. But I like the way that greenhouse gas is defined. It's defined as gases in the Earth's atmosphere that trap heat. So during the day, the sun shines through the atmosphere, warming the Earth's surface. At night, the Earth's surface cools, releasing heat back into the air. But some of the heat is trapped by the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. That's why it's so important that we continue to seek ways to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, because it's almost like a double whammy when greenhouse gases are released either through fossil fuels or through agriculture, or when methane through some of the meats are released into the air, some of the impact. So I'm going to pause there. If there's anybody who wants to maybe say a few words, two people, and then we will now go on to talking about the conference of the parties, because I'd like to talk about COP27 today before we maybe switch to having a conversation about what are some of the issues for Africa. And what I'll do is lead off on that and also have reactions, because the sense I get from those who have spoken previously is that there is a keen interest today to maybe talk about what are some of the things that Africa needs to do, and what are some of those issues. So I will pause before I go to talking about COP27 and the conference of the parties more generally. So please, Benjamin, can you admit those who want to raise their hands and react to some of this discussion so far?
Thank you, Doctor. Please, before I go on with calling the next speaker, Doctor, please check your side. A lot of requests coming to you. And secondly, please, everybody who are present here on the listening session or as a part of the speaker, please, can you help us to retweet and share this space so that more listeners and participants can come in? And secondly, please, I'll be calling two persons at this time. Ponslet, and I'll be calling Ponslet and Ife Chidera. Please try and make use of at least 1 minute to be okay for you to make a contribution so that Doctor can continue with her lecture. Thank you, and God bless you for your understanding.
Yeah, thank you very much, Benjamin. Thank you, Dr. Oteh. This is Ponslet Philology. I am a computer scientist. I run an innovation hub, Joko Labs, Banjul in the Gambia. As you might know, Gambia is the smallest country in mainland Africa, Nigerian by origin. I work in the space of using collecting data around climatic change. And from my experience, when you were talking about the Paris Agreement, and one of the vision is to fully realize technology development and transfer for both improving reliance to climatic change and reducing those greenhouse gases you mentioned. And what we do, I'll relate it to Goal 17, which is very key within the SDGs, is that we work with partners in the global south of the US, which have sort of similar topology with us here in the Gambia, especially our River Gambia, which is what makes really the Gambia, apart from the river is, that's why the name is River Gambia. And we collect data using OpenStreetMaps, using drone technology, around how our sea is affecting the salinity of the River Gambia. So some parts of the River Gambia where women do a lot of rice cultivation, they have now the salinity level has been high, and we are now trying to use crops, different type of mangrove crops from the Gulf Coast, New Orleans, and areas like that, which they used during after the Katrina crisis to try to reclaim some of our waters and do irrigation. So we use a lot of OpenStreet mapping technology and ODK tools, which is an open data kit. Everything we try to do in my innovation hub with the climate space is using open technologies to collect this data. And I believe that data is very important in climatic change. The more we get data, the more we are able to know how to speak informally. And that was one of the things I gained talking with small island states and in Africa during COP26. And that's what I'll be focusing again in COP27. Thank you very much for allowing me the space to talk. And thank you, Dr. Oteh.
But we must thank you. And I hope that you can share on your handle some background information, because one of the things that will really be game changing for us is technology, but more specifically data. And I'm really pleased to hear that that your innovation lab is focused on using data to help us understand better issues around climate change. I believe you and your colleagues must be really well sought after. But it'll be lovely to share that. I would also appreciate to you and to others. I believe it's probably been posted on Jumbo. The Oxford Global Research Initiative that Ms. Ako and I are part of. You can we set up an email address for this Twitter space called climatechange@ogri.org. Please send an email to us on some of these issues. But your point around data is huge. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you, the last speaker. Please, I just noticed, Doctor, there are a lot of international journalists that are present on this speaks. I would like to recognize them. Akwa Mohammed Kwarishi, proposed writer and also on foreign relation, a verified Twitter user. And the other person is Fasilat Oluyi, Musliman journalist, entrepreneur, and all that Premium Times Nigeria. Madam, you're welcome. And
But
please
I'd like
try.
to join you in welcoming them, and if they do have questions or comments that they'd like to make, you'll need to help me because so I'm the only one who's able to let people accept speakers because I'm a novice in Twitter space, even though you're always very kind to me and saying I'm doing fine. But I think I've dealt with all the requests that I got so far. I think I have one more request that I've figured out an easier way than what I was doing to get people to speak. So if they do want to say a few words, given their work in this area, please invite them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Please, the people I just mentioned, if you have anything to say, just request the mic, and the doctor will bring you up. Please, let's have Ife Chidera.
Hello, thank you so much for granting me the opportunity to speak. Hello, Aruma. So I want to speak about. I believe that African leaders have somehow made climate change about greenhouse gas and CO2 emissions. And that culture has somehow seeped into the psyche of people on the continent. So they think, oh, that's all climate change is about. But they forget there are other man-made causes, like deforestation that we see, felling of trees and all that. But even away from that, the Sahara has continually, recorded, high level of, heat, and that heat wind, has continued to blow all through the north, and it has caused great distress. So, and that's why we can see why Nigeria or Nigerian leaders kind of want to attack these problems, at the fringes, that is, attacking the symptoms and not the root problems, maybe because it is ignorance or just lack of political will. So, this continual heat wave from the Sahara and drying up of the north has caused displacement of farmers and herders. So, herders who have, their livestock surviving on the last greenery in the north have somehow found a way to go to other places that are not theirs, that are not primarily theirs, taking over other people's farmland. And we've seen a lot of incursions, and we've recorded a high level of violence in places like Zamfara, and we call it farmer header clash. We'll reduce it to farmer header clash, thinking, oh, these headers are just the belligerent, they are just stubborn. But this is their ancestral occupation, right? And in no defense, of course, to what they do, but they are being affected by climate change and we can't see it. And many of them cannot even express their problems. And you see, the funny thing is, that problem has trickled down south and is causing killings in the southwest and southeast. So I'm from the southeast, and IPOB has continually, protested the violent manner, in violent ways, the incursions of these herders who are coming down south now, looking for greener pastures for their livestock. So we can see the correlation and the parallel between, climate change and not just food scarcity, but in fact, wars and violence. Food inflation is about 22% due to low supply of food. And why is that? We think, oh, it's all CBN fault, it's all this, but we are not, I think, knowledgeable enough that it is due to climate change. Due to climate change, that these people increasingly come down, and because these herders, in a way to protest in a violent manner, do some, really violent incursions on people's farmlands, and they make these farmers refuse to go back to the farms. That's why we do not produce enough for the general populace, or enough for people to feed. And that's the problem. So when you hear, and I think so Nigerians do not expect, you know some leaders who want to vie for positions. They don't even have climate change as one of the priority, to look out for in electing in electing their leaders. And I think it's because of ignorance. And if we know the root problems and not just, are focused on the noise, hey, these people are wicked, oh, these people are doing this against us. But if we focus on the root problems, I think we would be able to attack the problems squarely. And just so that I don't, take more time, I just wanted to talk about the solutions to Jigawa. But I think I've exhausted my 1 minute. Thank you.
No, go ahead. You can talk about the solutions to Jigawa, and then I'll react to what you've shared. Go ahead.
Okay. I think the problem with Jigawa, the idea. I mean, the governor has said, but this happens every year. Torrential rainfall, and when there's the peak of the rainy season. But we forget that because of the incessant felling of trees, which have become some kind of a natural protective barrier around the River Niger, River Benue. And we know that water from the Atlantic come from the River Niger, River Benue. And when there's high level of course, this rainfall, it begins to seep into communities which are um, low lying, excuse me. So I think these are the problems. I'm not just saying, oh, 100 people are displaced, were killed, of course, and hundreds of thousands have been displaced. Next year, we'll say the same thing. I'm saying it's because of consistent rainfall, but that's not really the issue. It's really climate change and our attitude towards climate change. Thank you.
Go on, doctor.
Oh, sorry.
Doctor,
Sorry, I put myself on mute. Sorry about it. I was going to say that the last speaker has made some very, very important points. And if you remember, in my introduction, I talked about the fact that it will be important to have a session on the linkage between climate change and security issues. And some of the examples that she gave from her experience in Nigeria reinforces that there is migration of the herdsmen who are very used to their cattle being able to get greenery in the northern part of Nigeria. And as there's been desertification, as the lakes like Lake Chad have dried up, what you're seeing is that they've been moving further south. And for that to be put in context, I think she also talked about the importance of recognizing that some of these issues also affect other issues. So if you see inflation rates, food inflation of about 22%, all of that is coming from, of course, that people are not, there's not enough, because of the clashes, there's not enough farming that's going on. And she gave. I appreciated also her response to the issues around Jigawa. I really like the point about the importance of our leaders understanding these issues. I'm not going to attempt to defend the Nigerian leaders, but I think that at the level of the federal government, the president of Nigeria, President Buhari, the vice president, have been paying attention to these issues, and if you will, and by the way, one of the sponsors of the SDGs is actually the number 2 at the United Nations, Her Excellency Madam Amina Mohammed, who used to be Minister of Environment and did a lot of work in terms of laying the groundwork, but also really co-opted the private sector, got Nigeria to issue a green bond. You have a number of private companies that are doing, somebody had mentioned the importance of tree planting. Seplat Energy has been at the forefront. I think, and forgive me if I have the number wrong, I think they're planning to ensure that 1 million trees are planted over the next few years. I know that Stanbic IBTC has a similar initiative. But I say this to say that one of my goals for this engagement is to ask ourselves, what is it that we can do as individuals? What is it that we can do to create understanding wherever we are? And this kind of forum allows us to learn from each other, but allows us to remind ourselves that each of us has a role, even if our leadership is not meeting expectations. So can we take another person, Benjamin, please? Thank you. And then we'll go to COP27.
Okay, Lawrence, are you there?
Yes,
I know that sorry, Lawrence. I know that there are a number of participants from other parts of the world. So if because you can't use a Twitter Space on iPad. I'm having I'm having difficulty just scrolling down and follow on my phone. So if there are people who want to give other perspectives from other regions of the world, because I see that there are a number of people from other regions of the world, other regions of Africa, other regions of the world, please request for the mic so that you can give us other perspectives. Because one of the things I hope we can do in sustaining this Twitter Space is to learn from each other and learn from experiences from around the world. So please, Lawrence, sorry to cut in.
All right, no problem. Thank you so much, Dr. Oteh, and thank you so much, Benjamin. So I'll be making a contribution around, okay, first of all, introduce myself. I'm a student of climate change and adaptation, and this particular discussion speaks so much to me because my current work is actually at the interface between science, policy, and practice when it comes to climate change and adaptation in Africa. First of all, there are a lot of issues that borders around climate change that we cannot exhaust right now. So I'll just focus on the NDCs, IPCC, and the Paris Agreement, just like Dr. Oteh had introduced it earlier on. So I would say that first of the background I'll give is that Africa contributes the least to the impact of climate change right now. Africa contributes less than 4% to the impact of climate change, but Africa would suffer the most, and we're already suffering the most, of the impact that would be faced due to climate change. Now, it brings me to the premise that we need to begin to think of how to curb this impact on our own, even without involving those in the global north. And this is my premise. We have the nationally determined contributions that we are supposed to give, I think after 4 years or after 5 years, if I'm very correct. And then every country is expected to submit this to the IPCC. And then at the end of the day, it turns out that every country submits their own nationally determined contributions and their national action plans and whatever it is they want to do to be able to tackle climate change. But I was privileged to interact even at the UNFCCC on how that with the United Nations, on how that these things are being monitored. And in all sincerity, United Nations do not have the power to force people to even implement the things that are written in their nationally determined contributions. Take, for instance, a lot of countries are making commitments, even those in the global north. Now, they make commitments and at some point are not able to meet up to this commitment. So happens, take a cue from the Paris Agreement and then, of course, the last COP26 that held. It was expected that about $100 billion in terms of adaptation funds would be realized to be able to help adaptation processes.
Please, Mr. Lawrence, can you round up in 30 seconds, please?
All right, thank you. Now, the challenge is this. These global north countries would make commitment to be able to fund adaptation programs, and we as Africans rely solely on these funds. But then if it is not forthcoming, we would continue to suffer the impacts of climate change within our own region. And I just want to call our attention to the fact that beyond depending on the global adaptation funds that is not forthcoming, and these people can decide not to commit or not to do according to their commitment, there is the need for us to be able to look inwardly. It should be a plan, even as perhaps the African Union or individual countries, we need to begin to think of how we can self-generate adaptation funds, how we can begin to fund projects that are at the peak of low carbon development processes, and see how that we save ourselves, because we are actually approaching the tipping point, and the consequences will be more on us than it is
Thank
even
you.
on those in
Thank
the
you.
global north. Thanks.
I'd like to commend you, Lawrence. You're truly an expert on this, and your point around that the nationally determined contributions are originated by countries, and also that while the United Nations will cajole countries and encourage them, work with them to make progress, the responsibility is actually on these countries. I had alluded to your point around the commitment. The commitment was made in Copenhagen in 2009 that starting in 2020, that developed nations will contribute $100 billion annually to support developing countries, because, as you said, countries in Africa don't contribute the least to the greenhouse gas emissions, while they pay the highest price, and that has not been achieved despite that commitment. Similarly, there had been commitments by a number of countries around the world to stop using coal. But some countries, even before the energy crisis that we're seeing today, continue to use coal, which is even less clean than other fossil fuels. So your point around the developing countries, African nations taking responsibility is a very important one, and I hope that part of what we're doing today is really having each one of us reflect on how we can do that. So let me move to the conference of the parties, and a number of you have already talked about COP26, and COP is the acronym for Conference of the Parties. In diplomatic parlance, and I took this literally from the United Nations, one of their reports. The parties refers to the 197 nations that agreed to a new environmental pact, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which Lawrence, like others, call the UNFCCC. And they agreed this at their meeting in 1992. And so since that, there have been a series of COPs. The last one was held in Glasgow, hosted by the United Kingdom. And the next one is COP27, which is going to be held in Egypt from 6th to the 18th of November 2022. It seeks to renew solidarity between countries to deliver on the landmark Paris Agreement for people and planet. What does delivering for people and planet represent? The expectation is, of course, that during those 12 days, that heads of state, ministers, negotiators, along with climate activists, mayors, civil society representatives, and CEOs will all meet in Egypt for what is, of course, usually the largest annual gathering on climate action. In fact, this week there's a climate week in New York on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly. But this one is really just focused on issues around climate change. The expectation is that that COP27 will build on the outcomes of COP26 to deliver action on an array of issues critical to tackling the climate emergency. from urgently reducing greenhouse gas emissions, building resilience, and adapting to the inevitable impacts of climate change, to delivering on the commitments to finance climate action in developing countries. I refer again to the $100 billion that Lawrence just mentioned. Of course, faced with the growing energy crisis, the record greenhouse gas concentrations, increasing extreme weather events, that solidarity is going to be very important. And the Egyptian COP is really an Africa COP. The gathering that Egypt is hoping that we can focus on urgent and priority issues that are important for developing countries in general, for Africa, such as adaptation and climate finance. And maybe somebody can come back and talk about adaptation more specifically, why it's so important. So I'll just share what the Egyptians have said around the COP27. They look forward to building on the outcomes in Glasgow. What they call their unofficial themes include a focus on adaptation and agriculture. On that day, the issues will relate to adaptation, issues, agriculture, nutrition, livelihoods, and protection in coastal areas, loss and damage, disaster risk reduction, and solutions to agriculture and food systems that are vulnerable to droughts and floods. That's the expectation. On the day 2, which is the finance day, they expect to address finance ecosystems from innovative and blended finance, financial instruments, policies that have the potential to enhance access and scale up finance, including, of course, debt for environment swaps. Day 3, one day will be assigned to just addressing all aspects of energy and climate change, including renewable energy, energy conversion, green hydrogen, and smart grids. There will be a day dedicated to biodiversity, so nature and ecosystem-based solutions where the impact of climate change on biodiversity and ways to mobilize global action to halt biodiversity loss will also be discussed. There will be a focus on the impact of climate change on oceans, endangered species, the coral reefs, which is very important to East Africa, the sustainability of protected areas, the impact of plastic waste on ecosystems and aquatic species. There will be a science day, which is extremely important, and I think some of the issues both discussed by 2 of the other speakers will be important. There will be a day dedicated to solutions, where companies, governments, innovators will share their experiences and best practice. There will be a day dedicated to issues around reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Water is a big issue. Water scarcity and drought is particularly important, so there will be a day on that. Gender issues, women are more vulnerable to climate change issues. There will be a day also focused on youth. And of course, the issues around adaptation are very, very critical. And for those who are not familiar with the terminology adaptation, it's really adjustment or preparation of natural or human systems to a new or changing environment to minimize harm and exploit beneficial opportunities. I think it's McKinsey who estimates that I think on top of the $3 trillion that is required annually, you need, I think, another $3 trillion to make sure that infrastructure is more resilient, that buildings are more resilient. So this is a big area. I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done. So I'm going to pause there for anyone who has a comment on COP27, and then we will now spend some time on Africa. A number of you have already alluded to issues around Africa, but I do want to spend some time myself just providing a more strategic context to what I feel Africa should focus on. So can we, Benjamin, take two speakers on COP27 more specifically, please?
Thank you, Doctor. Please, on the speaker session or the listening session, please, if you have something to say regarding the COP27, please request the mic. And Doctor, please check if the request coming to your site so that we can easily bring them up. On the speaker session, please, if you have something to say regarding the COP27, kindly raise up your hand. Okay, it's only we only have a Kelo Uchendu. Kelo Uchendu, please go on. So hold on, quality. Hold on, please. Quality. You have something to say while in 7. Quality. Okay. Kelo Uchendu, go on, please.
All right, thank you very much, Benjamin. Just to share add on what Dr. Arunma have said on COP27, I was in Egypt earlier this year, and we are having some conversation with the Egyptian government around the preparation for COP27, and there was strong commitment from the COP27 presidency that COP27 will be a COP of implementation, in the sense that there have been, meaningful progress that made over the past. There have been treaties, there have been agreements, but too little have been done in the area of implementation. How do we move from action from some of these? How do we start translating some of these agreements into implementation, into action? And looking at some of the circumstances surrounding COP27 already, a lot of people have been pushing that COP27 will be an African COP, and with the African group of negotiators, the AGN, their position over the past, COPs, over the previous COPs, has been on finance, technology, finance, and these are very, very important topics because they are also means of implementation. You cannot talk about implementing some of these solutions without talking about finance, be it adaptation finance, mitigation finance, or even loss and damage finance, as most recently is one of the foremost topic, or technology transfer. How do developing countries gain access to technologies that allow them to, transition? If you talk about just transition, you talk about technology, but also how do they align this, carry out technology need assessment and develop technology action plans and align this with NDC processes. But from the civil society perspective, there is still a lot of criticism to Egyptian government around the accessibility of COP27. You're talking about hotel prices. People who made bookings before now have their booking cancelled, and the government raised the prices of hotels. So talking about accessibility.
Can you round up in 30 seconds, please? We have other speakers waiting. 30 seconds, please.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I think I can just stop now.
But permit me to react to what he shared, Benjamin. I really, I think I didn't get the person's name. I had Kello. Please, can you retweet? Can you tweet? The COP27 will be a COP of implementation, from words to action. Extremely important because there's been a lot of talk, and I'm proud that the Africa COP will focus on implementation. But I think what you, and I liked what you said, of course, being somebody who's spent the bulk of my career in finance, I like your point about you cannot implement without finance. So please tweet. If you tweet that and I find it, I will retweet it. But your point around we need finance for mitigation, we need finance for adaptation, we need to focus on loss and damage, and also on technology transfer. I'm very excited about all of the speakers. I think each person who's spoken is really an expert. And you've reinforced in my mind one of the benefits of having this kind of forum that we can learn from each other. As I said, the climate change at OGRI, I hope I got it right, missaccord.org, is available to you to provide any more information that you want to share with the research initiative. So please, the next person, and then we'll talk about Africa, which everybody on this call has been alluding to, and climate change.
Thank you, Doctor. Please, quality education for all. Juliet Kegu, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
If we can hear you loud and clear, please go on.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So my name is Juliet Kego. I'm based in Canada, and I just wanted to bring a perspective. There was a question Dr. Arunma had alluded to in terms of what can we do as individuals, right? And pointing out that, yes, the president and the vice president, they've done what they can, but at the individual level, what are the things that we can do? So I'm on several boards, one Environ Focus, a sustainability firm here based in Canada, and they've been at the forefront of advocating education, right, as a central piece of not just the SDG, but the whole conversation around how Africa can uplift itself, how we can take responsibility and really, create solutions that are culturally attuned, that align with the challenges that we have. Also, I'm on the board of the Canadian Workers Cooperative Federation. And what they do, in addition to Sustainable Community Aid Network, that's also based in Canada, is really creating avenues for women, because we understand that women bear a lot of the brunt of climate, crisis. And how do you get not just scholars globally, but African scholars, and then women that are not necessarily in academia, but have ancestral and indigenous knowledge? How do we incorporate that where we're talking about data points, where we're talking about technology, so that we're getting solutions that address at that fundamental level, something that Ifechidere had alluded to, the root issues, right? And so, and then finally, in terms of education being the central piece, I really want to applaud Dr. Arunma and the team behind this, because this is, I think, at the core of it. How do we educate not just citizens, but even those in government, those in the private sector, those in the public sector? How do we take away from this learning to go back to the companies that we're part of, the civic spaces that we're part of, to say, this is what we can do at the community level? So I'll give a quick example. Environ Focus has created a program where they match students in Canada to students in Nigeria at the primary and secondary school level to go through the entire SDG as a curriculum. And then I love what Kelo talked about in terms of the COP27 being about implementation. What they're teaching children, this student, is how to solve problems in their environment. How do you align all these SDGs so that you pick up one problem in your environment, you learn how to fundraise for it, to speak with institutions, right? The reason why this is important is that without preparing the next generation, that pipeline of leaders for the challenges, these global challenges of climate change, we may be, there could be a missing link, right? So in all solutions, in all the conversations that's going to happen in Egypt, whether it's around financing, whether it's around, creating actionable plans, the aspect around a new generation. I love that there's a session on youth. There's a session for women, but also a session for educators, I think is critical, so that we're able to the mainstreaming of knowledge that everybody, it's accessible to everybody. It becomes a part of what we do. And it then allows us to amplify the things that we already know. I can't remember the first speaker who talked about, this is what we've always done, right? But we just didn't have the frameworks for it. We didn't have the technology around it. How about now fusing all of that, where we're talking about technology, contemporary knowledge, the financing, but also the indigenous knowledge that we have, and create solutions for Africa by Africans. And we're building our own tables so that we're not at the mercy, of a Western gaze. We're actually addressing our problems, prioritizing what should be prioritized, and then creating solutions for a sustainable African world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well said. And I hope you'll tweet Solutions for Africa by Africans. And yes, it was, I think, Chidi Obiora who made the point around that Africans by nature have always taken the lead in understanding nature. But I really like your point around, and I will use your terminology, mainstreaming knowledge so that it's accessible to everyone. And I was very happy with the examples that you shared with us of the work that you're involved in. Well done on that work around how we can support the next generation to start taking the lead. I mean, they're already taking the lead. I mean, the Greta Thunbergs of the world, the Friday for the Future initiatives around the world, Vanessa in Uganda, are all leading this movement towards understanding the importance of doing something about climate issues. So I like the practical examples, and I hope that all of us can learn from your work at Environment Focus and with the Confederation as well as to how we can have more practical solutions. I'm also glad that you joined today, because I follow you very actively on Twitter, and I want to thank you for all of the learning that you've shared, which I've benefited from being one of your followers. Let me now turn to Africa and climate change, because everyone here has given some example. I'd like to just start with what I think it was Lawrence who said, the irony that Africa contributes the least to the climate crisis, but pays the highest price. So Mo Ibrahim Foundation has done this amazing report, which I think is a must-read, on how Africa can position itself in this debate. In that report, one of the things that they shared was that in the last 60 years, the 60 years leading up to 2020, that Africa has only contributed 3.3%, which is similar, I think, to the numbers that I think it was Lawrence who shared that as well, of the total global greenhouse gas emissions. While if you take Asia as a region, Europe as a region, or North America as a region, they've contributed at least over 25%, each of them. So really thinking about how does Africa position itself is very important. Of course, Africa pays the highest price. We've all seen the effect of drought. It's the most affected region in the world in terms of drought. It's the second most affected region in the world in terms of floods. It's affected by sea level rise, by desertification, by land degradation, and of course, this impacts livelihoods. The 10 most climate vulnerable countries in the world are African. So for me, this is an extremely important issue. And I think, Juliet, you said, we need to, think of African solutions. I think, and we need to build our own tables. Well said, because if we build our own tables, we will then have our own approach. And for me, what I advocate is an approach which I had shared before. I hope the mother can still feed her children, and not blindly say, well, I don't have clean fuel, so my children are going to die. So the right balance between development goals and climate goals, and that's why I like a holistic approach to the Sustainable Development Goals. I mean, we've got 600 million people who lack access to electricity. So we have to solve Africa's electricity problems. You've seen the load, you've heard about the load shedding in South Africa, and that impacts every sector. The lack of electricity impacts education, it impacts health, it impacts industrialization. Nigeria is still struggling to try to address its energy access issues. Almost 1 billion people, 930 million people, still lack access to clean cooking fuels. So if we just think about how we can use LPG gas and replace it with firewood in a country like Nigeria, where more than 90% of the country still uses gas that is on fuel, with all of the risks, the pollution and the health risks of doing that. So I think that some of there are people who say, oh, climate issues are a conspiracy to keep people down. I'm like thinking, no, people are dying from the health issues. No, we can have innovation that allows us to leapfrog and be at the forefront. So diversifying energy sources is key. The Mo Ibrahim report says that Africa has 40% of the world's solar potential, but just has 1%, just above 1% of installed capacity. Hydro is a big one. I mean, Inga in the Democratic Republic of Congo can basically provide electricity to the entire continent. But for the last 30 years, there's still been stories around getting Inga to work, and some of it is political. Wind power is still largely untapped. There are 21 African countries with known geothermal resources, but most of it is mainly unexploited. I've already talked about gas as transitional. So the other thing that I would like to say for me that is a guiding principle is that Africa is going to be key to succeeding with this energy transition. I say that because of Africa's green wealth. A large part of the world's land, wildlife, flora, and key carbon sinks are in Africa. I say it also because of Africa's blue wealth. 6 large marine ecosystems.
Hello, doctor. We stop with. Yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me?
We can't hear you anymore.
You can hear
Yeah,
me
we can
now.
hear you now.
Somebody was trying to reach me, so I was able to turn the person on, because this is important. I mean, the cobalt that is used for electric vehicles, that is used for precision instruments, whether mobile phones, as we're using for Twitter, or for airplanes, most of it comes from DRC. So I really think that the future also of the world is dependent on the continent, and we must claim it. DRC cannot be poor and mobile telephone companies are rich around the world. It doesn't make sense. So the politics is important, but also that understanding is important of what it is that Africa has and how we can harness Africa's resources. So I just wanted to set the tone. We have another 16 minutes. So if we take Benjamin another 10 minutes or so, and then we'll bring it to a close. But I think that there is a lot from this discussion, but maybe I'll summarize at the end. So please open it up to those who want to react, because I know there's a lot of appetite to discuss, what is the pathway for Africa and what are some of the solutions that Africa needs to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, doctor. I was having a network glitch before. Please try and send me a request as co-host again, so that we'll be able to manage people coming in and bring them out. That is for that. Please, we have Emeka. We have Emeka and Ife. Emeka, please go on.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Arunma, for bringing me up. I want to say that I'm a knowledge engineer, and I work with open data. I work with land governance. I work with urban forestry, and I work with cities and organizations creating knowledge systems to achieve their set objectives. I want to buttress Dr. Aruma's point recently about how rich Africa is by reminding us that 30% of the global biodiversity is owned by Africa. Now, we also need to start thinking that all our problems in Africa are opportunities for us to be king and lead the world into this green phase that we all want to achieve. Africa is the point where we can sell so much ideas and solutions to the rest of the world. But I want to speak on one of the goals, which is something I'm very passionate about, and I'm involved as a way of achieving our climate objectives in Africa, and that's SDG 11, Sustainable City. I need us to understand that we are challenged in Africa because 50% of the population of Africa are in what we call 7,600 urban agglomerations. 50% of the population are in cities, and most of these cities are not, how will you say, have enough green value.
Mr. Emeka, please, can you try and round up in 30 seconds because we will have like 3 or persons that still want to ask questions or contribute. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So these are cities are opportunity for us to, achieve our climate goals by creating green spaces, and allowing us to live healthily, and also an opportunity for us to ensure us getting jobs and education. So it's very important that our cities are inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. We also need to make sure that we can achieve the needs of the vulnerable ones, women, children, and persons. And all this could be done by achieving our climate goals. Our city holds a whole lot in our lives. So making our city less pollution, green friendly, can help us to achieve so much in Africa. Thank you very much.
So I'll just listen to the others, and then at 7:55, sorry, at whatever, 5 minutes to the hour, because I know we're in different locations, then I will summarize. So please continue, Benjamin. And I think I have made you co-host. Sorry.
Yeah.
I have.
But
okay.
Can I have Ife and Nene? After Ife and Nene, I will have a Adekola. After Adekola, we'll have a bed. After a bed, Ponslet, you've spoken before, but if we still have enough time, then I will bring you up. Ife and Nene, please go on.
Hello, everybody. Good evening, depending on where you are. First of all, I don't care if it takes into my time, but I have to acknowledge that Dr. Arunma is someone I adore and hold in so much in very high regard. The first time I came across her was when she was DG of SEC, and there was a hearing going on. My jaws were dropped. She knows everyone knows what I'm talking about, and I followed her ever since. So what I want to say quickly has to do with the role of has to do with how Africa has to craft solutions regarding the climate change problem. our solutions will not be the same as those in other parts of the world. And I like to say that I do not like that there are many problems of infrastructure development that we are attributing to climate change. So for instance, it is not completely correct to say that the farmer headman's crisis is happening because of climate change. There's always been the grazing routes. The herders have always moved their cattle down south during the dry season, and they move it back up to the north during the rainy season. But there's been a breakdown of law and order. There's been a breakdown of justice. There is a crack in that fabric which we must fix. It's part of the SDGs. Peace, peace, justice. It has to be there. So, for instance, if we say we come up to the south, we come down to the south. Lagos, for instance, is already below sea level. What is it already doing now to the kind of infrastructure that is needed, first of all, to contain the natural flood that will occur because it is lying below sea level? Is it following the footsteps of Netherlands, the kind of giant pumps, the kind of giant tanks? What dams are we building? So we don't develop, we cut all the trees without regulation, we don't replant them, paper is used anyway, anyhow,
Can you
nothing.
round up in
And
30
then,
seconds, please?
yeah, sure. And then we say climate change. But I'm saying that for Africa, we have to still hold our leaders responsible for infrastructural development that is lacking, that we are mostly attributing to just climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before Doctor will come in and respond, before the should draw the curtain, can we have Adekola? Adekola, after Adekola, we'll go to Abed. Adekola, go on.
Yeah, thank you, Benjamin, and thank you, Dr. Arunma, for this space. You've actually spoken about one of the things that is key to my mind. I'm an energy enthusiast, so I know that there's a lot that Africa needs to do concerning geothermal energy. When you talk about renewable energy, marrying SDG 7 with SDG 13, talking about clean and affordable energy to help us deal with climate change. So I think Africa should think on how we can tap into the rich, deep crust of the earth with the heat energy that can be used to also power our environment and take care of our energy needs. In Kenya is already doing something in that regard, but I think the rest of Africa should do or needs to do more to really look into. I know there is the issue of technology, but then if you are determined, I think we can get there to make geothermal one of the renewable energy options for us. Thank you for this.
Thank you so much, Adekola. Abed, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Go on, please.
Okay. Hi, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Arunma and the team for the space. For me, I just wanted to throw in a few words about the need to ensure there is sustainable and inclusive development for all people in various countries. Because here is what happens. If we wait development towards just one side of the society, then we are losing out on the other side of the society that is not being factored into it. So we need to ensure that there is equity in everything that we do to ensure that everyone everywhere is not left behind. I mean, the whole idea behind the SDGs is not to leave anyone behind. So governments should really put in the work. It's not just about the general assemblies and the conferences, but really putting in the work. And also it's not about the talk shows, but people putting in the work to ensure that no one is really left behind in the development of our societies. Thank you.
Thank you. Ponslet, please, can you just do a recap for 30 seconds? Then we'll go back to quality for 30 seconds and Doctor can come in, please. Ponslet, we can't hear you. Are you there? Hello, Ponslet. Ponslet, we can't hear you. Can anybody hear Ponslet?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. Now,
Okay,
go
yes.
on.
So I was saying when Dr. Oteh was talking about COP27, looking forward to it, I just want people to look towards the green zone if you are attending, or if you plan to attend. The green zone will be having a lot of showcasing on innovation and climatic action, and there you will find a lot of stuff on partnerships, and especially people in civil society and those that work around innovation. So I just wanted to mention that. And if Dr. Oteh can please give us the email again that she said we can leave comments on. Thank you.
I will post the email on Jumbotron, and you can have access to it from there. Quality, please go on. Then before we bring Dr. Oteh Arunma again, please make it brief. 30 seconds, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So I just wanted to share, this is again Juliet King, is that a few years ago, we partnered with an organization in Nigeria, in Anambra State, the Young Men and Women's Creative Organization. And what we did was we started identifying youth that were in this, agitation space of wanting a separate country. And what we framed the solution as was saying, instead of that energy being channeled wrongly, how about they get involved with tree planting? And so we framed it for them that if a certain number of 2-3 million people were lost in this cause that they're fighting for, how about the 3 million trees in schools all across, the Southeast? And so I'll be sharing some images because this organization, they've been doing some fantastic work of going into schools, to children, talking to youth, getting, otherwise youth that would otherwise be, using their energy for violence or negativity, but turning it to climate adaptation strategies that work for community, that work for it. So I just want to end on the note that it is possible for change to happen. We have to think about collective economy, solidarity, about
Thank you.
Solutions on without. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliet. Doctor, I think every speaker on the speaker session have contributed their opinion. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. This has been an amazing session, and I want to thank everyone who joined the Twitter space today. I want to thank our speakers who have shared so much. I feel like I've just learned so much. The focus that many of you said. Let's focus on practical solutions. From words, what I would say, from words to action. And I think it was Chidi Obiora who says, climate change does not discriminate. We should also remember that Africa has a unique position because we were always close to nature. And then the call by him and others to focus a little bit more on green finance solutions. Our first speaker talked about, and some others talked about focusing on the rural communities, on small header farmers who are really seeing the devastating effects of climate. I thought it was interesting, the two perspectives on what is generating the farmer header clashes, whether it is climate change issues or whether it is not. I think that there were points around the hypocrisy of climate change, both from the West and others, and the last two speakers the focus, I think Ms. Kago talked about the importance of education, engagement, awareness, and both the last speaker and her gave very specific examples of how you can empower the next generation. A speaker talked about having an inclusive approach that focuses on inclusion and sustainability. And I'm glad also that Some of you are already ready for COP27, and those who are there should certainly take advantage of the opportunities to develop partnerships with exhibitions in the green zone. And I like the note that the last speaker ended on, that it is possible for change to happen. I don't think we have a choice in terms of climate change. It will consume us if we don't do anything about it. But I would even add that Africa can lead in respect of the solutions. I think it's a real opportunity for us to, what would I say, to really take a leadership role in society, because Africa is abundantly blessed, but we don't have the legacy issues. We have a youthful population, and young people focus on innovation, and they don't have legacy issues to manage. So this is exciting. We will publicize when the next space will be, but you have convinced me that this is a space that we must continue. Certainly leading up to COP27 and maybe thereafter. One of you had asked for the email address. It's climate change, one word, at ogri.org. Climate change at ogri.org. And let me thank all of you again. And Benjamin, I want to thank you. I want to thank Dr. Jeff and all of you who have provided support. But the work just begins. Thank you so much. And we'll see you again at the next space.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you to every other listener, and thank you to every person who have contributed to this great topic. Very, very important topic, and it's going to be a space that will be coming up maybe probably, it depends on how chance the doctor find time to attend or create the space. But please have it in mind that you need to follow Doctor so that you're able to get some notification on this particular or similar topic like this. Thank you, and God bless you for taking your time to be to partake on this program. And I wish you all a very lovely evening and good night on my side.